we have to go into Friday's lesson. It's about the history of the nations. And it says, the history of the nation speaks to us today. To every nation and to every individual, God has assigned a place in his great plan. Today, men and nations are being tested by the plummet in the hand of him who makes no mistake. All are by their own choice deciding their destiny, and God is overruling all for the accomplishment of his purposes. I wrote a blog this week that has really gotten some people distraught with the idea that an ungodly person like King Nebuchadnezzar, but read in Jeremiah. Jeremiah says that I will call my servant Nebuchadnezzar. An ungodly, unrighteous, arrogant, prideful person. At the time he was called, he hadn't gone out in the 7 years yet. He hadn't been converted yet. He was so proud he thought all this was on him. He was so proud he made a statue of him that people would worship. This was an arrogant, prideful, pagan, unconverted, yet still called God's servant. There are godly people. Daniel, godly person. There are ungodly people that can be called to positions to achieve actions in God's greater landscape of reality for what he's trying to achieve. This point, though, every nation, every individual is assigned a place in God's great plan, yet we are by our own choice deciding our destiny, yet God is overruling for his accomplishments. How do you balance that? How do you balance that we have been chosen for God's great plan, but it's by our own choices we're doing it, but God is overruling for his greater plan? How do you balance that? Are we really free, or is he overruling? I think Jonah is the perfect example. Was Jonah the only person in Israel willing to work with God? No. So think that through. There were other people, but God specifically chose Jonah when others could have been called and been willing. He chose Jonah. Is God able to read the hearts and minds of people? Did he look into the heart of Jonah and said, that man, how he decides, how he thinks, his biases, his prejudice, his love for me, all the things that make Jonah Jonah is the man I need right now. He calls Jonah. Did God know that Jonah hated the Ninevites? Yes, he called them anyway. Is Jonah free to follow God or reject the call and run? There's Jonah exercising his freedom, by his own freedom. He rejects the call and runs. When God runs, does God overrule by sending a storm? Did Jonah understand where the storm came from and why it was there? Whose choice for Jonah to be thrown into the water? Jonah's choice. Now, do you think this choice of Jonah was because he loved the men on the ship so much? Do you think he was looking for a submarine to pick him up? No, seriously, from Jonah's perspective, what was Jonah really choosing to do? Death. He would rather do what? Die. He would rather die than go to Nineveh and preach to these people. That's how much he hated them. Okay? Now, you understand. God understands this. Now, does God love the Ninevites?
Yes.
Does he love Jonah?
Yes.
Does Jonah have a hate problem in his heart?
Yes.
So, he chooses Jonah, sends the thing. Jonah throws himself. Now, Jonah's choice. I'm gonna just die in the ocean rather than preach to those people. I hate them so much. Does God overrule?
Yes.
He sends a fish, overrules. You're not going to die here, Jonah. Now, do you think Jonah now had opportunity for reflection? No, seriously. Do you think he had opportunity for... And he did. You read about it. He had serious opportunity for reflection. Okay? And it's because God hates Jonah or because God is intervening, calling Jonah for a specific mission we're going to get to in a minute, but at the same time working to free Jonah of the hatred he has and fill his heart with love. It's brilliant and beautiful as you see how God works. Now, he was going to preach to the Ninevites. Now, the god of the Ninevites was Dagon, the fish god. Now, think that through. I'm going to send a prophet to speak to these people who worship the fish. Maybe it would work better if he's delivered by a fish. Seriously. And a fish delivers him. And of course, they repent. Jonah's still mad. And then you have the whole actions with the vine. God intervenes with the vine. Who caused the worm to come and eat the vine? And all of these things God is overruling, but Jonah is deciding. And ultimately, I think Jonah comes to new epiphanies, new insights, and heart change. And God saves the Ninevites. So do we see the balance here between free choice, God's callings, and his overrulings? that never really violate our free choice. Yes?
And you've got to say that it lets you know that the Ninevites were extremely violent people. They had a reputation, a horrible reputation, did terrible things to people.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just Jonah saying, oh, I hate them. I mean, he was probably partly hate, partly fear, because they were well feared, because they created fear in everybody that they came in contact with, because they were extremely violent.
The lesson also talks about God sets up kings and takes down kings. Do we believe that's true? He orchestrates. There are other places in the Bible where God actually says, some of the kings of Israel, I didn't choose these kings. Remember that? These kings I didn't choose. But yet it says he sets up kings and takes down kings.
Well, maybe that means he does some, not all.
He does some, not all. Or, just like the circumstances here, they weren't who he wanted, but knowing the hearts of men, he permitted this to happen, and he overrules the consequences and intervenes to keep his plan moving forward. And in the end of time, where we are today, we see the message, the Son of Righteousness rising with healing in his wings. Does attention need to be drawn so people can practice discernment